Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Today I'm going to be discussing the Wikiup. The Wikiup is a simple dome or conical shaped structure that consists of an underlying wood frame and then an outer layer of insulation. It was used by many people not only in North America but elsewhere in the world, and still is today in many places. As a survival shelter, it's not only versatile but it's also easy to construct. And by versatile I mean that you can be in many different climates, many different environments, and the Wikiup will be a suitable type of structure for you to build. And you can build it and adapt it to your specific environment almost regardless of where you are. Here in the coastal redwood forests of Northern California, there are a wide variety of materials to use when you're constructing a Wikiup. Anything from Doug fir, redwood, tan oak, bay laurel. There are, the list goes on. But in essence, you have a wide variety of materials to choose from, not only when you're constructing your base frame, but when you're constructing the insulation layer as well. And I would say primarily what I would use is this right here, which is redwood duff. And it's basically the leaves that have fallen off of the redwood tree and collected on the ground. And I would suggest using that primarily because in most redwood forests, especially in this area here, you can see that most of the ground cover is comprised of that duff, and it can be anywhere from a couple inches to well over a foot deep, so there's plenty of material to use there. The first step in constructing any shelter is choosing a suitable location. Suitable means a variety of things. That might include the orientation of your shelter. So here in Sonoma County, I want it to be facing south because the sun is in the southern sky for basically all of the year. So anything on the southern slope is going to be warmer than on a northern slope. It may also be drier because the predominant wind and weather comes from the northwest. So south-facing slopes, generally drier and warmer. So I'm going to put my shelter on a south-facing slope. Another thing you may want to consider is where your shelter is relative to the area around it. So here I'm on a slope. I'm going to choose a location that is probably on the other side of a big tree or a big rock face so that when runoff comes down the hill it doesn't come straight into my shelter. So it's going to be facing south and hopefully downhill to some extent. Don't build your shelter near any dead trees. So I'm going to choose an area that is relatively within a small area, if I can find one, free of standing dead timber that could fall on me while I'm in my shelter sleeping, or while I'm in my shelter at all for that matter. You don't want to build your shelter in a floodplain, a creek bed, a wash, or really anywhere that has any signs that that area may at some point in time be underwater or have a lot of water in it. So I'm going to pick a spot that's above the floodplain, above any creeks, that has a very low risk of being inundated by water. This area to my right is the site that I've chosen to build my Wikiup. It's ideal for several reasons. One, it's south-facing. There's sun on it, so it's going to be warmer than if I built it upslope or on a northern-facing slope. It's flat, so it's going to be relatively easy for me to construct my shelter and not have to worry about compensating for the hill and that kind of thing. There's no dead standing timber in the immediate area around where I'm building my shelter. There's some dead trees downhill, but they're about 40 or 50 feet away, and I don't think they're going to reach my shelter even if they do fall. So that's a judgment call on my part, but everything you decide is going to be somewhat of a risk or a judgment call, but you're going to have to make those decisions. So I placed my shelter here for the reasons I mentioned before, for the fact that there's no dead standing timber, no dead trees within this immediate area. I'm not in a creek bed, I'm not in a floodplain, so I don't have to worry about water too much. I have the tree canopy to protect me from rain to some extent, although I don't want to rely on that for the most part. I want to rely on my shelter and its construction to protect me from the elements. The next step after you've picked your site is going and collecting the materials. So that's what we're going to do next. what I'm doing now is just collecting a bunch of duff to use for my insulation layer. So I'm just going to use this wool blanket as a kind of a trap so I can collect all this stuff. Oops. You want to be careful not to hurt the salamanders. Now that I've got a good base of materials built up, and I will have to get more, but I've got a good base to start with. So I've got larger wood that's going to be the base frame, smaller stuff to weave in between that will make the trellis set up for my duff. Now that I've got the base structure done, I need to start putting on insulation. So the first step I'm going to use to put on insulation is I'm going to gather either redwood boughs, or maybe some bay branches with leaves on them, something to cover up all the smaller holes so that I can then start putting on the really fine stuff, the redwood duff. So this is what you'll get with a base structure. Fairly simple. All I did was just lay on these big branches, and then I sort of wove in the smaller ones to help hold it all together and to provide some steps to allow the duff to sit on it and not just slide down. So this is the first step. This is the structure, the base structure. One thing about this structure you might notice is that it's not that big. I'm sitting inside of it right now, and I can sit cross-legged like this, or I can lay down in the fetal position, but that's about it. That's the point of this structure, though. I wouldn't want this to be like a big camping tent where there's room for 5 or 6 people inside here. If I'm by myself, I want the structure to be just big enough for me to fit inside of it like this. And the point of that is that my body heat will heat the inside of this at night or during the day when it's cold. If I had a huge space, I wouldn't be able to keep the inside of it warm, especially if I don't have a fire. My body heat's the only thing I have to keep myself warm. So by building this structure relatively small, it may not be the most comfortable, but it will retain your heat if you build it right and have enough insulation. Another important thing when building your shelter is that you put some insulation, some thermal mass on the ground inside. I don't want to be sleeping on the dirt because I will lose my body heat to the dirt. It's cold. So by putting a big pile of duff in there, maybe 6, 8, 12 inches thick even, I'm keeping myself off the ground and allowing this to absorb and retain my own body heat, which will keep me warmer than if I slept just on the bare ground like that. So what I'm going to do is just throw this pile of duff in here, and it's up to you. You can get all these larger sticks out. They're not that comfortable to sleep on anyway, so I'll spread the duff around like this on the inside. That way it keeps me off the ground at night. And one other thing you want to make sure you do when you're collecting duff, especially for the inside, not so important for the outside, but when you're getting the duff for your bedding, you want it to be pretty dry. You don't want to be sleeping on damp, moist, or soaking wet duff or leafy debris. So now that I've got my duff on the inside and my base frame built, I need to start working on building up some insulation. So what I'm going to do first is collect some redwood boughs, maybe some bay branches with some leaves on them, something that provides a more substantive cover for this base frame so that I can then start putting the duff on and won't have to worry about it falling through onto the inside. So as I put these on, these redwood boughs, I want to start from the bottom and go up so it works like a shingle. So I have the first one, second one goes over top, third one goes over top that second one. That way if it does rain or there's precipitation of any kind, water will kind of sheet off of it, as opposed to starting at the top and going down where water can go underneath each layer you put on. So when I do it, I put these on, then I'll weave another one in up here, like that, and I'll work my way up until I get the whole thing covered. So now my base layer of insulation is getting up to the point where I can start putting duff on it. I've layered it. There's between 1 and 2 layers on here, depending on where you are. If it looks like it's going to rain or it's colder, I might suggest doing 4 or 5. But because of the fact that I'm doing this for a demo and I don't want to just strip all the trees in this area of all the branches, I'm just going to do 2 layers on here. So 2 layers of redwood boughs over top of the base frame. Once that's done, then I can start putting on duff. And I'm just going to scoop up all this stuff laying on the ground around here, this redwood duff, and start piling it up, starting from the bottom and working up to the top until I have probably 7 or 8 inches, and then I'll go and do the whole thing over again so I can get it maybe up to a foot or thicker. And the thickness depends on how cold it is where you are. Here, right now, it's almost 70 in the middle of the day. It's early spring, but if I was going to be in a place where the daily temperature was going to be in the 30s or the 20s maybe, and at night maybe it would be low 20s, upper teens, I'd probably want 2 or 3 feet or more of insulation on this, just to make sure that when I'm in there, my body heat will be able to heat up the inside and not get dissipated as it goes through the walls and out into the atmosphere. So for here, probably 1.5, 2 feet's good, because at night right now it's only getting into the 40s. So in that last step, which is putting on all the duff, I added on a foot of duff to the entire thing, starting at the bottom, going to the top, and doing all the sides and the back. And one other thing I had to do was lower the door. I had it higher and I thought that more heat would escape, you know. And in general, something good to know is that when you're building a Wikiup, you want the entrance to be relatively small, because that's your biggest point of escape for heat that you might generate inside there. So make the door as small as you can. Obviously you saw it was a little tight for me to squeeze out of there, but that's what you want. You want the door to be small so that if you decide to cover it up with something, say I might cover it up with a big piece of bark, or maybe, you know, some kind of meshed pine bough thing that I might weave together, but you want the entrance to be small. So you want the structure to retain heat. You don't want the door to be a huge source of heat loss. So this is the final product. This concludes how to make a Wikiup. Thanks for watching.